Welcome back to Pathfinders. I'm your host, Pete Schramm, founder and CEO of Latitude. And today we're going to talk about what we usually talk about, believe it or not, career maps and a personal board of advisors, the where you want to go, past, present, and future in those 5 different columns, and the who's going to help you get there and who's helping a very, very influential guide along the way. They might change as we go through different phases of our professional adventure. This is going to be posted on LinkedIn and the other podcasting platforms. So as Divya is talking and sharing her story today, please comment. And a pro tip is to think about how you may take action throughout this process and say like, okay, I love that idea and concept. Could I or should I be doing that in my personal and professional journey and adventure along the way? So without further ado, favorite quote for our guest today: being a leader doesn't require a title. Having a title doesn't make you one. Love it. Divya Divakaran is a distinguished HR leader, SHRM Executive Network member, Forbes HR Council member, award-winning strategist, nearly 2 decades of shaping high-performing teams, from scaling startups to driving enterprise success. She has done it all. Can't wait to dive in. Author, speaker, business awards judge, passionate about redefining HR in the boardroom and hopefully making sure that HR gets into the stinking boardroom. She's big on leadership, big on culture. Outside of these accolades, right, which she has a lot, and we didn't even cover some of them, her journey is one of resilience, navigating challenges, transforming setbacks into opportunities, and driving impactful change. Love it. Recognized with multiple prestigious HR awards, her insights continue to shape the future of work. Her book, From Paper Pushers to Strategic Partners, is a must-read if you're an HR leader wondering, how do I navigate from startup to enterprise? We'll hear a little bit more about that in a second. Fun fact about Divya, also a fashion designer. I don't know how many fashion designers we've had on this show. She showcased designs during Minnesota and New York Fashion Week. Big deal. Welcome to the show. Congrats. Talk to us about that fashion designer flair. Usually we don't hear that, Divya.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me here, Pete. That dives right into my childhood aspiration, actually. So yeah. I was so much into DIYs when I was growing up. So I would cut really good clothes and make whatever I want with that because my mom used to have a small sewing machine at home, and I watched her sew men clothes. But then I was so passionate about creating my own outfits that I started testing out, where I've got into a lot of troubles as well when I cut my mom's 6-yard sari and make a dress out of it. And I used to get into trouble, but that has been my passion and growing up. And I think I took a break from that until my daughter was born, and I decided to make tiny outfits for her. And seeing her being my model and seeing my vision come into fruition was amazing. And that took me to that passion of, or continuing that passion of creating designs and being that fashion designer.
And I think there's a little bit of, design in the workplace. And I think if we think about, what you've been able to do around the country, it's pretty remarkable. We'll get into that piece a little bit. So whenever you're thinking about what you want to study in school, did you say, all right, I'm going to go and I'm going to study fashion?
That's interesting again. So even though my passion was creative side, I was very much into what would give me, I'm much risk averse, let's just put it that way. So I was born in a middle class family, and steady income is very important. So I was always looking at possibilities of studying a course that would give me steady income. So I was more passionate into doing an MBA in finance. However, I did my bachelor's in commerce, and then I got recruited during the campus recruitment, and I was selected to be part of HR shared services as a recruiter instead of my passion of wanting to be in finance department. So again, during those days, we had the personality assessment, and I kept asking them, can I be in the finance department? And they were like, no, your offer is for HR because based on your personality, you will do well there. And I was in denial. I was not okay in just being in HR. To be completely honest, back then, when I knew what I knew about HR was only recruiting, right? I didn't know about all the HR operations and what we can do. So in terms of HR and creating impact in the organization, right? So for me, it was only recruitment. And I was like, okay, I'll start somewhere. And that is where I met with my first mentor. So she was amazing. She was so patient with me. And then she was like, I know, sweetie, you want to be in finance, but then you need to be patient here. Learn this first, at least for a year before you can get to the FSSE, the Finance Shared Services.
Yeah.
So there I was patient, but then during that 1 year, what I did was I kind of like networked with other people in the other department. That's when I knew that, okay, there's benefits administration, there's shares administration, there is payroll administration, and then HR business partner. That was a whole different world where they were actually being strategic. So what I did was I made friends with people in those departments as well. And then I kept asking them questions. I was just being curious more and more and asked them questions as to like, okay, what is it that you're doing and all of those. And while I was doing that, I was still in my mind, I was thinking, okay, after 2 years of completing my MBA in finance, I'm going applying for a finance job within the organization or outside. That's what was in my mind. And as I learned throughout this first year, when I was learning more about HR and the possibilities of growing laterally within HR, made me think that, okay, end of the first year of my MBA, when I was doing both working and pursuing my MBA, I decided to take HR as well as a specialization. So and finance both together and completed it in 2008. And after I completed my MBA, that's when I was like thinking back, and do I want to switch my career like out of HR, or should I explore everything within HR? And that's how I started with payroll. After I completed my first year, they gave me opportunity to do payroll processing. I was in the payroll department, and then I got into HR operations and learned the ins and outs of everything, starting from HRIS and benefits administration, onboarding, compensation, and compensation planning. So I was part of all of those projects. So I would do things. One thing I would say is I would always, during that first 2, 3, 4 years, you're like a sponge and absorb as much of information as possible as you speak to so many people, and volunteer. That's the best time. I cannot think that, okay, if I was sticking to my 9 to 5 or whatever the hours was I was supposed to work, I wouldn't have had that diverse set of experiences. I would just volunteer myself and ask, hey, what projects are you working on? How can I help? And I'll just poke my nose wherever possible and get curious, ask them questions. Sometimes there were some mentors, they were like, okay, instead of teaching you, it is much easier for me to do it myself. I'll be like, you do it yourself, but tell me how you're going to do it. I'll do mine, and then you check my work. So that was much more easier for them to not have me do it all, and then they have to again redo it if I messed up. So they did their part and I did my part, and I was able to cross-verify with theirs as to like, okay, what is it? So that was my way of learning and experiencing the HR gamut, I would say. During that period, right, it was already like 5 years of me laterally learning everything. Mm-hmm. And people who joined along with me were already there leading a team and getting into management roles and all of that. And that's when I felt like, sometimes I used to feel like, okay, I'm still here in the entry level learning all of these. Is this am I doing the right thing? But boom, it was actually a right thing, because after I got all of those exposure, I joined a startup organization where I was a second employee. So I was the first HR in the organization and second employee, basically, other than the director or senior director of that organization. So
on that one, real quick, I think it's
Sorry.
one of the things we talk about a lot on the show is the transition from your first organization, first role, and leaving that company. There's a lot of emotional internal reflection that takes place at that point. So talk us through a little bit of the, how you weighed that. Did that, startup organization come and find you? Were you kind of looking? And what went through your mind as you're saying, okay, it's time for me to take this big leap of faith? And I think you took about as big as one of the leaps you could, going from stability to flexibility and opportunity. But, you mentioned to us earlier, you're risk averse. And so I bet that had a little bit of, maybe a lot of bit of calculation into your decision-making here.
Yeah, so it was very emotional, I would say, because I had built right out of college, and they were my family, kind of, because they were the one who trained me, developed me, molded me to be who I was at that time. And it was a very emotional situation. But then there was one thing that I was very sure about was even though I was risk averse, I love challenges.
Yeah.
Risk averse in terms of steady income, challenges in terms of wanting to do more. That's an environment that I would thrive well. So I like challenging. I don't like status quo. So at that point, I felt like I was hitting that ceiling in that organization as to okay, I kind of have learned all of this.
Right.
So I did explore within the organization to get to the HR business partner role. But you know how it is, right? When you are at an entry level and you grew in that organization, sometimes it's hard for you to get that opportunity to be that HR business partner, because again, it depends on certain organizations. So that was a challenge for me.
And I think the piece that you looked around internally first, and you raised your hand. We'll talk about the career map here in just a second. But I think that's the big piece that so many people say, son of a gun, I'm frustrated. Maybe we're not all working in the same office. I don't get to see these people. I can't do some of what you did is just poke around, and some of what I did, just open up the office, knock, hey, can I get you for 5 minutes? Can I, learn more about what you do? That's tricky to do nowadays. And I think that's an important step that some people forget about potentially in this career development and exploration process. So good on you for that one. Divya, question for you. At some point, you probably put together, either in your head and hopefully on paper at some point, a bit of a career map. Say, hey, this is kind of where I want to go next. And then maybe you shared it with some of your mentors and guides and advisors. At what point did you start to map out some of where you wanted to go professionally?
So it was after I completed my MBA.
Okay.
And I had that diverse knowledge of, okay, HR is not just this, it is so much. Yeah. So I laid out as to okay, so it starts with recruitment, and then comes to onboarding, and then comes to HR operations. When I say HR operations, it is benefits and payroll administration and compensation, data analytics. So I put in all of these and looked at my strengths as well. So I was okay, where are my strengths? I lack attention to detail. So I was okay, so there are things that I might not succeed well, and there are things that there are areas where I could do really well, and where my interest laid. So that is where I looked at, and I felt okay, I want to be an HR business partner. So I could actually touch on all of these at the same time. I could be more strategic and provide guidance to the organization or the business unit that I am supporting. So that's where I thought about that, and I felt okay, for at least 2 years I did try out within the organization to see if I would get that opportunity, whether it is more of an associate or whatever, like talent development, enter into talent development, and then get to the HR business partner. So I tried all of that, but those were the areas where they were not willing to take on somebody who doesn't have experience.
Right.
Let's just
Right.
put it that way.
And that's a frustration in any professional opportunity. Hey, you can't do this job until you've already done this job. And you're like, what in the world? Like, how am I supposed to get started in that? And it's a tricky one. But I think you brought up a great point of the stretch assignments and being in sponge mode and continuous learning. And say, hey, can I just take this off your plate a little bit? And I love the approach of, they say, no, it's going to be faster for me to do it. And you persist and say, no, give me a shot, right? Let me try, because how in the world am I supposed to grow and learn? And you're getting a great bang for your buck at free 99. And it makes a lot of sense. So I'm curious, in the Pathfinders methodology, we talk about the career map looking forward in 5 different dimensions, right? The job, the skills, the experience, the education, accomplishments, and some of the fun stuff. So for you, whenever you're talking to different individuals, developing them, what goes into the different dimensions of a career map, future looking for you? And there's other, angles and aspects around geography, industry, salary, but let's just talk about what's been helpful to you as you're guiding others on their journeys as well.
Yeah, I use the Delegate Elevate tool. So have the 4 quadrant and have them write down as to like, what is it that you are great at and love doing, great at and like doing, not great at, but like doing, not great at, but also don't like doing. But these are all part of your responsibilities. So that is where I would always start with and ask my mentees to list it down, lay it down. And it is the top most, the left quadrant is what I would focus and say, okay, these are the areas that you really enjoy doing, that you are passionate about. And then see if there is a career path that we could build based on those, and how can you delegate the other ones off to somebody else who have that as their top left quadrant, right? That there will always be people who love doing what you don't like doing. So that's the first step that I would take to identify their strengths and their passion.
I think it's so important. And we talk about the ikigai for some of that. I love the quadrant. Anytime we can put something on paper and we have a little bit of a continuum, if you will, so that you can show some of those different pieces. Okay, so we put together our career quadrant, if you will, and then what? We start to fill in some of the experiences and what's possibles there?
Right. So after that, it is more of like, okay, this is what you're great at and you are passionate about. Now let's look at your assessment, like what are your skills and competencies? You think you are great at, you love doing this. What are others saying about it? So understanding or getting the feedback from who they are working with and identifying their skills and competencies and areas that they have to improve, and put together an individual development plan for them to be where they need to be. If for some reason there is no path that they are aspiring to in the organization, especially if I am the HR in the organization, I would definitely work with the leaders to come up with a position that would be more of a path for the employees based on their strengths. So this is another article that I wrote, like, don't force a square peg in a round hole, because that is not going to be helpful for retention. So that's how I communicate with the leaders of my organization, to see the potential and the strength and passion so we can retain them.
I think it's something that more organizations need to do. And I want to talk now about kind of big company versus small company. Ton of opportunity for this in a larger organization with, I go back to Dunbar's number often, 150, 250 plus employees. I know you guys are scaling, so we'll talk about that in a second. So whenever it's a larger org, you have more opportunities to move around and move up. But at a smaller organization, at a smaller organization, there's not as many opportunities to move up. but I think there are more opportunities to fill in columns 2, 3, 4, 5 of the career map, where we say the skills, the achievements, some of those certs, OJT, the stretch assignments along the way as well. What's your take on that of, if I can't necessarily move up, how can we use a bit of a career map in IDP to show, hey, what else is possible, and how I can continue growing every 3, 6, 9 months, even if my title's not changing and even if my salary's not changing? Because, hey, let's face it, we might like that, but it's not always a reality or a possibility.
Yeah. So I'm thankful for starting off in a larger organization, because that gave me that opportunity for me to gain that experience or expertise there. However, I have also worked in a smaller organization, and I am currently working in a scaling organization. So when I joined, we were 72 employees. Right now, we are 200 employees. So in 4 years, we have scaled up, and we didn't have a career path or much of a structured progression. It was only one way. It was more of, okay, so you become an engineer, and then you become a project manager, and then you become a leader of the department. Now that I'm interacting more and more with the employees, I'm starting to understand that there are people who absolutely hate being a project manager. They want to be individual contributor and be a subject matter expert. And that's a path that we have put together. So now it is more on interacting more with the employees, identifying the key people and what retains them, what would make them leave an organization. It is absolutely important for even a small organization to see, it's even more important for a small organization than a large organization to ensure there's a better career path for the employees, because losing retention is high. The need for retention is high in a smaller organization, because you have put in so much investment in that employee, and they're taking the knowledge away, and then you have to refill and again spend so much on developing them. Might as well create a path for them within the organization that would help them grow, and that is much more better for the organization's success and sustenance of the organization, I would say.
I liken it to a bucket of water, right? Smaller company, smaller bucket of water. Bigger organization, it's a whole tank, or maybe even a truck full of water, for example. And what happens whenever I put my hand into this bucket or tank of water? It'll displace a little bit. That's the orientation, implementation, assimilation. But then my hand's in that water, this new employee, new person. And then it kind of steadies out. Right? We get into steady state. We're moving and grooving. Everything's happening. And what happens is, other hands may leave that pot, and that's going to impact us, right? We're going to feel some of those waves along the way. And then what happens whenever I leave, right? Smaller organization, smaller bucket of water, it's going to create more waves, right? And I might take a little bit of that water with me, depending how fast or how I move my hand out, even more waves. And it's tough. But at a certain point, it's going to get back to that steady state. I think that's the biggest piece for us to realize is, the organization's going to continue along the way, but let's face reality. It can be tough. It can stink whenever that happens, especially for the rest of the team, especially for the folks in HR, because then you're thinking, oh my goodness, who else can do this? And I think that's where the piece of a career map can come in so helpful, right? As these opportunities open up, challenges as well, right? We're able to say, hey, not only do we know who can go into this role, but now we know who also wants to go into this role. And that's a big piece of it as we keep going. Divya, would you talk to us about the book and some of the articles, right? You're well known in this space, but let's give a shout out to some of the great work that you've been doing and putting into the world.
Hey, so I recently published a book called From Paper Pushers to Strategic Partners and What is Stopping You. So this is mainly targeted for the HR professionals. And I've been part of all of these forums and groups, right? So Schramm HR Executive Council, and then Forbes HR Council, and so many other groups that I'm part of, peer groups that I'm part of, where I've heard HRs complain a lot about how difficult it has been for them to prove their value in the organization. And they are so stuck doing the tactical work, right? So this book is specifically for them and for the CEOs who are looking at scaling the organization. So they understand the value of an HR, and for the HR to look at it from a different aspect as to like, it's okay to be a pusher. And if people see you as somebody who's too pushy, it's okay, because you have to share your perspective to the organization's leaders, because if they are having tunnel vision, then you are actually looking at it from an outsider's perspective. You might come and ask questions or coach them and develop them. Or even sometimes it is like throwing in an idea that they might have not looked at, and they might take it, they might not take it, and that's totally up to them. However, as an HR, it's important for you to prove the value to the organization, because you are the people person, and there's a reason why you are there in the organization. So look at it from the people aspect and look at it from the business aspect, and you are the merger of both, and having a place for yourself in the organization is absolutely important. So that book is all about that.
Okay. So two more questions here. Let's think about, the pros and cons of having HR at the table and a voice when they are there and when they aren't there. Could you walk us through some of that? And I particularly love the, aspect of your financial background, because I think that's a big piece whenever, typically we think of HR, oh, they're just the fluffy people, and they're just going to try and do all these things and, parties and events and feel good, pat on the backs. And it's like, nah, that's not just it. My goodness gracious. I mean, some people might do that, but talk to us, pros and cons there, not there.
Yes. So pros are different perspective. You are able to see through it from the lens of people and business. When I say as an HR, it is also important for us to speak the language of the leaders. So, which means financial acumen and business acumen, absolutely important for you to develop both of those, so you can speak their language and they understand what you're saying. So speak data analytics, and financial acumen and business acumen is the key. How an organization is making money is important for you to know. And then speaking in terms of that, so anytime a leader is coming and saying to you as to like, okay, all of these employees are leaving, what's going on? And you say, okay, they are leaving because of this. And then your leader is like, okay, let's just backfill. But if you as an HR is actually showing the data, see, we lost this person because of this. Let's make sure that we are not losing any more people because of this, because of the financial impact that causes to the organization. So this is the data as to like how much we have invested in this resource. And to bring in another person, you are again taking more people's resource because they are again training and developing them. And we need to make sure that retaining them is also key. And speaking those numbers is important. So having an HR in the boardroom or having the seat at the table alongside a CFO or a COO is absolutely important for them to be able to see it from a people-centric culture, how a people-centric culture drives the revenue as well. Even though it is not directly correlated in numbers, you cannot really see it. However, it is important for you to be able to show that. The cons of not having HR in the table is what I said. You will be seeing a lot more attrition in the organization. And the HR is the one in the forefront. They are the face of the candidates, right? So they will hear what the candidates are saying. Why are we losing on candidates? What are the competitors doing? How are they offering? So having all of this insights helps the organization's leaders to make the decision as to like, okay, our competitors are offering all of these benefits. We should be doing all of these better so we can actually retain them. Otherwise, they are now just going to take away all of our resource as well as us not able to be competitive in the market. So
I agree with you there. And I think the final question builds on what you just talked about there, right? Where you say, hey, I'm the organization, right? Thinking from an organizational perspective, what's the value to the company whenever all of our people, all of our employees have a career map and they have a couple of these guides around them, a personal board of advisors? Where do you see that, Divya?
Oh, having the personal board of advisors is absolutely important, and alongside the career map, right? I mean, like for any employee who is coming into the organization, for them to be able to see so many options of like how and where I could get to is the key. That is where you are setting yourselves, your organization different from any other organization if others are not doing it. But that is the first step where a new hire comes and sees that, oh my God, there are so many opportunities for me. I can either grow laterally or vertically or horizontally or diagonally, however they want. Seeing that career map is absolutely helpful for them to foresee having a career rather than a job in the organization. So that's the first step, career versus job. And then the second is having go-to resources that they could rely on and talk to, not just their manager, their immediate supervisor, or their leader of their vertical, but having mentors from other groups are helpful for them to learn what they don't know and what they don't do on a day-to-day basis. So they can actually talk to other, say, for example, if there is a software engineer who is in mainframes and then there is a Java mentor, then it is more helpful for this person to understand how is it different from mainframes versus Java, and how is all of this related to an AI, or should I do Python and should I learn that? So understanding all of that possibilities helps with a PBA, or not just one, but multiple PBAs and a better career map.
Love it. Divya, thank you so much for sharing the stories and experiences with us today. I'm going to do a quick recap. I took a couple of notes over here. So DIY experimenter as a child, from trouble to passion, vision to reality, your creative interest, but with also that risk-averse appetite. Steady income from your commerce degree was very important. You went into recruiting in HR, not yet finance, started here, and you met your first mentor. You networked around and learned about the HR function. You learned what's possible. You stayed curious. You're still driving towards that finance role. Haven't quite got there, but during your MBA, you studied HR and finance, graduated in 2008. You added in experiences around payroll, HR ops, ben admin, comp, onboarding, planning, and you stayed in sponge mode, and you started in sponge mode and stayed in sponge mode, volunteered and stretched yourself to soak up more and more and more. And after 5 years of this lateral learning, you loved the challenges, but you wanted to do more. And so that was where we got into that really audacious leap into the startup space. You shared that your first career map, CM, Rev Part 1, was put pencil to paper after your MBA. You documented some of the strong things, interests, and some of the gaps, right? Where are the opportunities? You mapped a path. You talked about the career quadrants, right? Good at to bad at, love doing, dislike doing. And then it comes to a little bit of a SWOT analysis, strength, weaknesses, opportunities, and then the skills and competencies, but with the feedback from others. I thought that was a very helpful piece. You realized retention was different for all of us. And that's whenever we see what motivates the individuals. Everybody, check out her book, From Paper Pushers to Strategic Partners, for HR leaders, CEOs, business partners. HR of the past is not how to think about the seats and impact of HR of the future. HR is merging people and business. We got to be able to walk the walk and talk the talk and know how the organization makes money. When we do this, and when we put the career map and personal board methodology in place, people understand the who, how, what, where, and make it a reality. So from career to job and from paper pusher to strategic partners, thank you, Divya, for joining today.
Thank you so much, Pete, for this wonderful opportunity. It was great chatting with you and learning from you as well. It's a great conversation. Thanks.